The next question is, how do you get those materials? You don't buy pure calcium. You don't buy, pure cobalt. You buy all these things. I generally recommend that people look to get as much as possible of their mineralogical deficiencies addressed through rocks. In nature, nature grinds up rocks through volcanism, through glaciation, through erosion, and the river valleys are oftentimes where we have the permanent agricultural civilizations, and that's because we have rock minerals being applied to the soil on an annual basis through flooding over time, through centuries. So nature does it with rocks. We can do it with limestone as a rock phosphate's a rock, green sand's a rock. There's various different minerals here that we'll show you, and what their mineral levels are, their sources, etc.
I found some of Dan's fertilizers here, and I'm going to show a few of them to you. These are probably just being used maybe as little sample jars, but these would be the kind of things that he's using on the farm here. So here's a calcium, probably a calcitic lime, very, very finely ground, so it may even go through an irrigation system. You can see it's quite white. A very useful fertilizer for most farmers is a calcium. What else do we have? I can't read all the labels here. There's a potassium, which is, you usually don't need too much potassium, but he might just use it in very small amounts, or maybe he is potassium deficient. Let's see, we have a molasses, which is very commonly used for its carbon, its sugar, but also for its nutrients, to feed, really mostly to feed the microorganisms in the soil, the fungi and the bacteria, and also on the plant leaves if you're foliar fertilizing. So I usually use a liquid molasses, but here's more of a dried one. There's a kelp. Again, I usually use more of a liquid kelp, but here's a dry kelp that could go onto the soil. Maybe he's using it probably on the soil. It's a really great broad spectrum fertilizer, but also it has plant growth hormones that help encourage plant growth. There's a little bit of compost there, which is obviously the most important fertilizer, and so much more than a fertilizer. Brings in your microorganisms and your organic matter into the soil. There's a nicely colored, I think it's an iron sulfate, nice green color, which you wouldn't use a whole lot of unless you knew you needed it based on a soil test. And with most of these things, you're not using hardly any unless you have a soil test showing you that you need it. There's a zinc, which again, that's not that much to look at, but a zinc. A dextrose, which is another, usually a less expensive form of sugar. I usually like the molasses, but a dextrose is another way to go. There's a humate. So a humate is usually comes from leonardite, which is like a soft brown coal that is mined, and what it has is, what it's often used for is in a foliar feed. It helps, if I'm spraying kelp onto my plants, this is going to help the leaves take in the nutrients, and many times more efficient. It'll help that foliar fertilizer work. It can also be used on the soil, but it gets pretty expensive to do that. But if you just have no organic matter and you need some help fast, this just helps a lot of processes happen in the soil. It's a great catalyst. That's called humates, or humic acids. Anything else here? There's a bit of salt, which you don't want too much salt in your diet or in your soil's diet, but a little bit of sodium is very important for your plants. So that's what that salt will be for. So there's a few things there.